we had Christmas break. We came back, and I could not function. I started like getting like hard time getting out of bed. My friends would try to, like, come on, dude, you got to get to class. And I'm like, I can't. I just couldn't get there. And I started missing a lot of classes, and I was getting scared. And, I had to get a lot of support from family and friends just to kind of try to make it through.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I somehow made it, but my grades were horrible and I was feeling like crap. And so finally I was at a point where I couldn't even get out of bed. I was just not functioning well at all. I had gone to get some counseling and just nothing seemed to be working. And I finally went to a brain specialist, and he said, you need to take some time off. You probably suffered more of an injury than you thought.
Here we go. We are connecting, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we...
All right.
There we go.
We have connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, thanks so much for joining, man.
Hey, no problem. I know there's technical difficulties can be a real pain in the neck,
Yeah. Switching back to Facebook Live, you never know what you're going to get sometimes. So absolutely. But what I was telling the audience is you are the host of a new show called Soul Tears. And when I've been listening to your shows, and what really strikes me about the shows is the power of every story of every individual that joins your podcast. So first, what kind of got you on this journey of starting your podcast?
Well, I think I will start off with a story of my own, because stories is the topic of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
So when I was 19 years old, I was my first year of college. 18 years old. It was my first year of college. I went to UCLA in Los Angeles, California. And I'm an 18-year-old freshman, going to parties, having a good time, like first time away from home. I was really excited. A couple months into that, I was playing football with some friends. We like to go out and play flag football and have fun. And one day I was playing and I was diving for somebody's flag, and I missed it, but this guy behind me kicked me in the head.
Oh.
And the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in a hospital. I had no idea what had happened. I had suffered a severe concussion, and I had amnesia for like a day or so. So
wow.
I couldn't even remember where I was or anything. So they checked me out and they said, just rest and, whatever. So at UCLA, our classes are in like 10-week spurts. So we have 3 sessions instead of 2 sessions like most colleges have. So I started really feeling kind of out of place, a little down. I just wasn't doing well, but somehow I kind of kept things up. I finished that quarter. It did really well. It was actually my best quarter I've had, and was doing great. We had Christmas break. We came back, and I could not function. I started like getting like hard time getting out of bed. My friends would try to, like, come on, dude, you got to get to class. And I'm like, I can't. I just couldn't get there. And I started missing a lot of classes, and I was getting scared. And, I had to get a lot of support from family and friends just to kind of try to make it through.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I somehow made it, but my grades were horrible and I was feeling like crap. And so finally I was at a point where I couldn't even get out of bed. I was just not functioning well at all. I had gone to get some counseling and just nothing seemed to be working. And I finally went to a brain specialist, and he said, you need to take some time off. You probably suffered more of an injury than you thought. And he pulled me out of school. So now I'm at home. All my friends are at school. I'm still completely depressed, just having a really hard time. And, you know, at that point, I really didn't want to be around anymore. I mean, you know, I had lost sense of my life and what was going on. And I thought, you know, I just can't be here anymore. And, you know, my family was really worried, and thank God they were worried. You know, so I got some help, and, you know, after a few months, I started doing a little bit better. And eventually I was able to get myself back to UCLA. But I get back to UCLA and I get super depressed again. And everything just, you know, I'd getting all this treatment, but everything went bad and I got really depressed again. So I had to leave school again. And this time I wasn't going back. I mean, there was no way I was going to make it back. And I had moved in with my father and his family, and that was, you know, at the lowest point I think I had at that whole time. But I just couldn't fathom the idea of giving up my dream of being in college and all that. So I was seeing a counselor, and I told him, I want to go back to school. He goes, there's no way you can make it back to school. You missed most of the semester or quarter. You know, you're just depressed. Everything's not looking good for you. And my family said, no way, Sean, you can't go back right now. Just, you know, they saw me suffering. They weren't going to let me go back. But I went back, and in order to get back, the counselor said, all right, read this book and give me a book report on Monday. Okay. And I remember that whole weekend I'm sitting there reading this book, and somehow I did it, and I gave him a report, went back to UCLA, and I was able then to finish the year out, ended up graduating on time, and kind of things, you know, progressed from there. But mental illness and depression has been a part of my life since then. And just because I got through some of those tough times doesn't mean they didn't go away. Yeah. So I have a real interest in starting to talk more about this, because I think there's so many people out there that have gone through difficult things, who've maybe had some severe depression and now are just kind of living with it. Maybe not living the best they can, but they're taking a medication, or they're doing something and they're just not feeling great, but they're kind of just getting by. And I was like that for many, 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 many years, just getting by. And, you know, only in the last few years, I've started to like say, you know what, there's more to me than being depressed and suffering from, you know, a mental illness or what have you. And that kind of started my journey. And so the podcast is my way of kind of allowing people to share their own stories, the things that they connected to. And I call them soul tears, because I call them emotional aha moments. Those are the moments that you just connect with so much. They push you to take some action or do something. You can just feel it viscerally in your body. And those are the kind of stories I want to hear. You know, sometimes there are moments that are just, you know, traumatic. Sometimes there's just these revelations like, oh my gosh, I finally get it. I finally know what I'm supposed to do, or whatever. So those are the stories I'm really interested in collecting, and you know, taking my story as a way of kind of framing some of the conversations and my experience and things like that. So it's not necessarily just a mental health show. It's really not. It's about mental wellness, but it's about you know, those moments that really kind of move you to do something and take action.
All right. Awesome. I'm all about action, man. So I can relate to that 100%. I want to go back to your story, because I'm just curious about what's the book that the doctor gave you.
Well, I was taking a Jewish studies class at the time, and I can't remember the exact book, and I don't remember the exact book, but I remember I read like 300 pages in a weekend, and I had to go back and then beg my professors to give me a makeup chance, because I had missed so much class. So yeah, that was a pretty stressful weekend.
And so would you say that story you shared with us is, when you think back and you think about aha moments, was that your aha moment, or what is your aha moment?
Well, what I'm learning from a lot of my guests is that you can have, and I knew this, you have many of them.
Mm-hmm.
But my aha moment was more recent. And one of the things I do is I'm a filmmaker as well. And I made a documentary as a personal documentary about a woman who lived her whole life as a man. And at the age of 62, she wanted to transition and start living as a woman. So it was a very personal story. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a labor of love. It was a project, one of those projects. And I spent about 3 years making it. And after I made it, you submit it to film festivals. And I thought I had made it, Nathan. I'm like, I'm a filmmaker. Like, I'm going to get all this press, you know.
Yeah.
I had done none of that. But anyway, I finally got accepted to this film festival, my first one. And I was so excited. And I called Lisa, who's in the show. I said, Lisa, we're going to Seattle. And we're going to this film festival. And so we were excited. And we get to Seattle. And we're driving. And I'm asking Lisa, why are we driving so far away from the airport? And she goes, well, I'm just following directions. An hour later, we show up in this small town at a high school, literally a high school in the middle of nowhere. And we walk in, and I said, is this where the film festival is? She goes, yeah, this is where the film festival is. Just, you're going to be in the science room today at 3 p.m. And I said, the science room? You got to be kidding me. I came all the way out here, and you're going to fucking you're going to put me in a science room? And so I talked to Lisa. I said, Lisa, we have to get out of here. This is ridiculous. There's no way I'm going to, I was so like offended. My ego was shattered. Like, God dang it. I didn't expect a red carpet, but this is ridiculous, right? So I did stay. Lisa said, we're already here. Let's just stay. So the time comes for the movie. About 15 people trickle into this science room, and we had to remove the Bunsen burners because, we had to be able to see the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And after the screening, we usually do a Q&A. And so the host asked, anybody have any questions? And this woman, and she must have been maybe 20 years old, just started bawling. Just like uncontrollably bawling. And so much so that Lisa had to go and kind of console her because she was so upset. And she finally said, Sean, I am so grateful that you guys came. This movie made so much to me. And I'm so grateful that you're here. And I'm sitting in the back going like this, like, dude, it's not about you, man. You just impacted somebody. You helped somebody. It's not about your ego. It's about helping other people. It's about, being of service. And that was my aha moment. And that was like, I need to do more than just worry about making a stupid movie. It's not a stupid movie. It's a very valuable movie. But I have to do more than just worry about my own ego. So that kind of started a process. And about a year ago, I started thinking about how I could tell more stories and share these type of stories. And that's where the idea of Soul Tears came about, is sharing moments like that like could be transformational, life-changing. And that's the experience that I had. So that's what kind of led me to what I'm doing now with it.
Yeah, man, it's so powerful whenever, because I think everybody at some point has that moment, that aha moment of like, okay, I'm stepping out of my fear and I'm going to be courageous. And what we create, we don't necessarily know how it's going to impact someone. We don't know who it's going to reach. But the point is that it's out there and it's true to who you are as a creator, what the story is about. And at some level, it's going to connect to somebody in the way that your film connected with that person in that science room.
Yes, I'm hoping so, yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious with all that you've learned from your own experience and the experience of others, what would you tell someone who's got a story that they don't think that it matters right now. They don't think that their story is important, what would you tell them?
I'll say that if you can change one person from your story, you can change the whole world. I mean, stories are so powerful that if I did nothing else in the podcast but reach one person who and it made a difference in their lives, then I've already won. I've already done the job that I want to do. I mean, obviously you want to impact as many people as possible, but your story is you, and it can help so many people. So there's no story that um, that that shouldn't be told if it's something coming from you that's you're passionate about. So stories are healing. Stories are a way of communicating. I mean, stories really just is how we can best communicate.
And from your perspective of being a filmmaker and a storyteller, what are the components of a good story?
That's a good question, and I would say there's a couple elements. One is, kind of a structure, like where in the world are you in the story? What's the state of your world that you're in? Describing it to your audience. What's the story? Where are you? And what challenges do you immediately face? Like what's going to get you? What's going to what is your challenge? So, and then once you get kind of have your challenge, it's like, okay, now you want to be able to kind of explore a situation, maybe something that you did to resolve that situation. But the problem is it's never just straight from I was struggling and then I get better. It doesn't work that way. I wish it would. It's like you struggle, then you drop off a cliff a little bit, you come back up, you breathe through water, you maybe come down a little bit, and maybe at the end of the story, you're not exactly where you wanted to be, but you're moving along with your life. You're doing okay. You're feeling, you have some progress or whatever. So a good story takes you to just experiencing somebody's real life situation. So when you're telling stories, naturally you tell stories every day. When you're go to work and you get hip, you tell your coworker, oh my God, this is what happened. I was driving and then this car slid in front of me and I slammed on my brakes and then I went around and I was feeling really stressed and then, all those are stories, right? So stories don't have to be that like dramatic, but I gave you a little structure of a story, but a story just comes from your heart. You know what I mean? If I'm writing a screenplay or making a documentary, I might have a little bit more formality in the process.
Yeah.
But if I'm just sharing what's in my heart, whatever, you don't have to have there's no rules. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
There's no rules. I think that's powerful in the fact that when you said that it comes from your heart. I think you're right. I think when you are really in it and you are emotionally connected to whatever you're communicating with someone else, that person can feel what you are saying and they can feel the energy that you're bringing to that communication, whatever media it is.
Absolutely. And that's why podcasts can be so powerful, because you get to freely tell your story. Sometimes it's not on video, so you're not worried about video sometimes. You just have something you want to share, and the voice can express so much. I mean, you can hear, if you hear the shows that you do or the podcasts you listen to, like, you can tell when somebody really is in it and expressive and connecting with it, and that's what makes it interesting to listen to, instead of just somebody just describing their situation like a medical situation, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm just a doctor, and he told me this, and I'm doing this, and I was at work today, and a car cut in front of me, and then I moved around the car, and I'm here at work. I mean, it's you describing things is not necessarily a story. Sharing things is a story.
Man, yeah, sharing. I like that. Just using the word sharing, I think is powerful. So my story, and my main mission is about labels. So I'm curious, like thinking about your journey and dealing with depression and mental illness. How would you say that that label for you has changed over time, from that time when you're a 18-year-old kid to now?
I mean, completely dramatically. I mean, I couldn't even really own it myself for many years. I mean, oh yeah, I had to take a couple medications, but that was something that happened. I'm not really all that conversation. But you know what, Nathan, that doesn't work because, you know, 10 years ago I had another major flare up. I had some difficulties and some challenges. I couldn't ignore that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's only taken, I think, only in the last. First of all, I would never have this conversation I'm having with you a year ago. There's no way. I barely told anybody that I had any, only my close friends and maybe some family knew I had some. My family knows, of course, my challenges, but I never shared any of this anywhere. So, I've already changed that definition for me. Like, it doesn't have the same. Yes, I have suffered with mental illness. Maybe I've been diagnosed with depression or OCD or whatever it happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
But that, I own that now. That's a part of me. That's a component of who I am, but it's not my big picture.
Yeah.
I'm doing other things than just going through life and dealing with my depression. Although I deal with depression and anxiety and all those kind of things, but that doesn't define me.
Yeah.
But for a long time, I was limited by those thoughts and feelings. I didn't believe that I could do some of the things I wanted to do because I was always going to have these challenges. And I always had to kind of set my standards lower and just, not do all the things I wanted to do.
Man, that's so powerful. I relate to that on a huge level with my own story and living with the disability. And for the past 9 years previous to now, working specifically with people with disabilities. And like you said, standards, man, and labels, no matter what they are, play a huge role in where we see our standards. And what I say is there's points where that bar is so low that you have to pick it up from the ground because that's what people expect from you. So it's so critical.
And I would just say that some of the worst labels that we can put on us are not put on by other people. They're put on by ourselves, limiting labels. I follow your story and I admire all the work that you do. And, maybe your disability is a little bit more, it's more prominent. You can see it. Something that's more visible. Sometimes with people with mental illness, you can't see it. You might be going through your day wanting to not be around, but people don't always know that. But you control in your mind. So I think you can label yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's definitely your perception of what you at the end of the day buy into. That's the thing that's the most powerful because we can buy into those outside expectations, but at the end of the day, we choose what sticks and what we say, oh, that they might think that, but that's not me. Absolutely. And I'm curious in your journey, if there's somebody out there that's struggling and they're feel like they're lacking support right now, just from your story, what did you find the most supportive when you were going through those difficult times?
I mean, in crisis situations, it's the people that are closest to you. Don't be afraid to go to them. You might feel like you're bugging them and you might feel like, you're a burden or a hassle, but believe me, they want to hear from you if you're hurting. And so I went to the people that close to me that kind of gave me some shelter from the storm a little bit. And And sometimes people don't have that. And, you know, obviously if you're in a dire situation, you just get any help you can. I don't care if you shop with somebody on the street, you know, maybe call 911 or whatever, in those dramatic situations. But in more manageable situations, just talk to somebody. I mean, I know it's hard to, but your future self will look back and say, I'm glad you did. Because when I'm in the midst of a tough period, I can't see that. Somebody could tell me whatever I'm saying right now, I wouldn't even listen to me, you know, I'd be like, you don't know the heck you're talking about, dude. And so, you know, you just have to have that, some kind of that instinct inside somewhere that knows there is somebody that cares about you, and you're not going to always feel that way. And it feels like it, right? When someone, when you're in that situation, it feels like there's no way you're ever going to get out of it, but you somehow you do. You know, I can share a couple of techniques that have worked for me. When I haven't had somebody like around, let's say I'm at, you know, I just don't have anybody around, I journal. I mean, I will take it, I'll take a journal and literally write how angry or frustrated or sad or whatever I'm feeling. It's like I'm talking to somebody. I mean, talking to a piece of paper, but it's better than talking to nobody. And I found that technique helpful in really dire situations when I just need to express something. And, you know, whatever reason, you're at work or you're, you know, and I just find that helps. That's not what you do when you're like in a severe crisis, but it's been a coping mechanism for me at times, and it's really helped.
Okay. Yeah. And kind of diving a little bit into that, like leaning into that, you do a great job on Instagram to offer tips on, I think you do it on a daily basis, if I'm not mistaken. So what are some of those, like, what are your go-to tips that have served you the most, other than what you just said about journaling? Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you a couple that work, you know, almost every time. One of them is walking around the block. I mean, literally walking for 10 minutes. If you're in a work environment or you're in an office or whatever, luckily I'm in Southern California, so I can usually get outside and walk. But wherever you can, if you actually just get up and walk around 10 minutes, you're going to feel better. I mean, you're not going to like feel the best in the world, but that is definitely a coping mechanism. One of my strongest, and we hear it all the time from everybody, but I'm a convert to it, is gratitude. Gratitude, and my practice is in the morning, I have a journal and I write 3 things I'm grateful for. I try to do that every day. It doesn't always work, but man, that has been a life changer, a game changer for me over the last year. And what happens is you can like read back your past days and see, oh my gosh, you know, these are all the things that I'm grateful for. So it kind of trains your brain, I guess, to look for, to be grateful, appreciative. So that's definitely up there in terms of tips for sure. You know, there's some gimmicks. It works. If you smile, even if you don't feel like it, it works. And it's the lamest thing in the world, but if you sit there and you smile, that works. And another thing that I do that really helps me is I have an app on my phone. It's called the Insight Timer, and it's just an app where you know, meditation app. But it's got like these morning meditations are basically like pep talks almost. They're just setting you up for the best day ever. I have one that just keeps saying, you know, we're gonna talk and we're gonna make this is gonna be the best day ever. And you just listen to this, you know, positive stuff. You do some little meditation with it. And sometimes if I'm having a hard time getting out of bed, I'll pop one of those on. And sometimes it takes 2 of them before I like get going, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one that I use a lot and I really love.
Dude, so I want to go back to the smiling thing because I've got a story that relates to the power of that. So I was going through emotional intelligence training, and we would go to Philly to do in-person training, and then we would all come back home for a couple weeks, and then we would go back. And one of the challenges we had to like practice our eye contact and smiling. And I remember going to the gas station one time. I looked over at a lady at the pump opposite to me, and I smiled, and I kept the smile on my face. And this lady threw something away, went around the other side of the pump just to re-look at me and to smile, because she was caught off guard that first somebody was looking her in her eyes.
Right.
And second, somebody was just, she was like, I wonder why that guy's smiling. What? But she left and she was smiling.
Yeah.
So it's contagious for sure.
Yeah. It just somehow works.
Yeah, man. Well, I've only got a couple more questions. So what's got you excited as you move forward with Soul Tears, or any future projects you have coming up?
I'm going to a conference next week, which I'm excited about. I might see you there. And I just, I like going to those conferences because you get like a shot of energy. You get to be in front of people that are like, just the vibe is so good. So that's definitely one thing I'm looking forward to. And I'm just looking forward to doing more, maybe speaking more about the things that have worked for me. I am by any means like, healed. I'm not going to have any issues again. I'm just trying to like manage myself the best I can. And I want to share some of those techniques like we're doing today with other people. So I want to, that excites me to be able to like talk about things that have helped me. And, as I'm talking about this, I'm just feeling that gratefulness thing again, because you don't realize how much my family has meant to me in terms of being alive and being here and being well. I mean, I'm just so grateful to them. So that just kind of struck me as we're talking here. But yeah, I'm really excited about kind of sharing more about things that can help. And I'm really excited about the podcast because I just love the stories that people tell. And that's how you learn, like I said. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of people. So Stefano said, what conference? Stefano, buddy. But Summit of Greatness, people, if you don't know, get to knowing about what that is. It is a great place to connect with some great people. I mean, talk about the use of community. It's such a great place to do that. And then Gina Moe hopped on, and she's been one of your guests on your show. And I remember, because you guys are talking about a moment that happened at the conference. And what struck me in the story was the part where somebody said, and the hush fell over the audience, and it absolutely did. We were all invested and emotionally connected at that moment to the story.
And by the way, I can't think of a more emotional aha moment than that moment. I mean, because it impacted not only Gina, but everybody in that room remembers that. And then it just, so that's one of my favorite episodes that I've done so far, is just that moment and her sharing it. But yeah, I love it.
And you can, if you don't know what we're talking about, go check out the podcast, because you share that at the end of the episode. You share parts of the actual moment, and it's amazing. Being there in person, it was absolutely amazing for sure. So if somebody's sitting there and they're saying, well, I really like what Sean's talked about today on the show, and I think I've got an awesome aha moment, how can they connect with you to talk to you about their story?
I think the best way to connect with me is Instagram at Sean Steve Bloch, and that's Bloch with an H.
Yeah.
And you can also go to Soul Tears on any of the apps, and you can listen to the podcast there. But I think Instagram probably right now is the best.
And we'll make sure and drop that in the comments so you guys can connect directly. I've got two last questions. First is, if you could go back and I want you to think and imagine it's your last day, but you as a 5-year-old is meeting yourself on your last day. I want 2 pieces of advice. What would your 5-year-old self tell you on your last day? And then the opposite. What would yourself on your last day? What piece of advice would you have for your 5-year-old self?
I think my 5-year-old self, I think my 5-year-old self was a little bit needy. I probably would say, is anything going to get better than where I am right now? And can we get some ice cream?
Okay.
But my 5-year-old self had some, I think if I had to go talk to my 5-year-old self,
Yeah.
I would just give my 5-year-old self a big hug and say, it's going to be all right, man.
Man.
You know what I mean? You're just know that it's going to be all right somehow.
Yeah.
That would be probably my advice to my younger self,
I mean, that's so powerful. Actually, I posted today about the power of a hug, and it was a post from a TV show, and it said, hey, this is a hug. This is how you know somebody cares about you. Like, you got to let it happen. And trust me, I never was a hugger. So, but I believe in the power of actually having a hug for sure. So that's great advice.
Hugs are the best. We need touch. A lot of us don't get any touch, and that's contact high. There's a contact high, and I'm not talking about marijuana. I'm talking about touch.
Yeah, physical touch, absolutely. And the more I dive into the stuff I'm doing, absolutely, you see that all the time. The more you can create that, the more connection and the more love you are going to be able to feel. Absolutely. And then my final question, man, is what does No Label Defines Me mean to you?
Well, I think to me, it's an internal conversation that your label, there is no label that defines you because you can do whatever you put your mind to. So when I think of a label, I think of limiting. It's a limiting thing. So yeah, don't have a label.
Don't have a label. Yeah, and I think the thing that touch right there is the internal conversation. Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind if you label something like that person is such a generous, person and a label can describe something positively, but if it's meant to be limiting and it limits yourself now.
Yeah. So rip it off and rewrite a new one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I want to acknowledge you first for doing what you're doing in the world, for creating Soul Tears and creating the opportunity for people to share their voice. And thank you for everything you shared on the show today. If you guys have found value in today's episode, make sure and share it out. If you've got some tips as well that you use to support your mental wellness, let us know in the comments. We all want to learn and share with each other. And every Friday, man, we'll be here 7 o'clock. And you're up to big things. And when you're up to big things, you must be patient, you must be diligent, and you must never, never quit.